Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. The working day in the company ended. Michael, having concluded the computer, went down to the underground guarded garage of his own farm. There waiting for him was a brand new premium car, which the young businessman had purchased only a month ago. Great car, thought to himself Michael. Driving out of the garage on the street, such a car is not ashamed to come to a meeting with foreign partners. The latest model does inspire respect. Michael recently turned 30, and he celebrated his anniversary with a truly grandiose scale. He rented the most expensive restaurant in town and invited a lot of guests. The fun lasted until the wee hours of the morning. So this day he himself and his comrades will remember for a long time. Michael quickly drove to the highway. There was almost no traffic at that time. The businessman easily reached his luxurious cottage in 15 to 20 minutes. On the threshold of the house, he was already met by his fiancée. "Are you punctual as always, my love?" The girl kissed the groom on the cheek. "And I just baked your favorite spinach pies. Come wash your hands and come to the table." Michael lightly embraced her and smiled politely. He and she were to be married in just a month. So the bride spent all her free time controlling the organization of all wedding processes, starting from the choice of location for the photo shoot and ending with the color of napkins and balloons. The wedding promised to be very pompous and loud. The family even gave a note about this event in the press. "Mole, come all who know the bride or groom, or just want to express their respect and wish the couple all the best in their new life together." Michael's fate could be called perfect, if not for one thing. But in fact, he didn't really want to get married to such a responsible step. He was pushed by his own parents, who saw the commission as a perfect match for their son. "Michael, honey, don't worry," his mom Vanessa told him. "The girl is very good. Thanks to her parents, our position in the market will only get stronger. You know their family is one of the most influential in the design printing industry. They'll give us access to their own sites, and that will be very good for our company." "Yes, son. Listen to what your mother says," with a laugh. Stephen agreed with her. "Father, believe me, in a business like this, it's not good for men to think. A marriage of convenience is the sure key to a happy married life. We know that." Stephen smiled meaningfully at him and winked. His wife only grinned briefly. She knew perfectly well that if she did not marry the stubborn son now, and with the benefit of the family business, it would only get worse. And Michael, who was always by nature a proud and equal fellow, nevertheless resigned himself to his parents' choice. He realized that at his age, many of the world-famous entrepreneurs already had families and children. He had to think first of all about the continuation of the family, that having a wife and heirs would help him to strengthen his own position in the business environment. And in this respect, Clara turned out to be quite an acceptable option. She was beautiful, sweet, educated. Besides, his parents had known them for a long time. And Slaga, to tell the truth, was the first contender for the role of his future wife. The girl herself was not against such a marriage. She had liked Michael for a long time and wanted to marry him. Michael hoped that over time, their affection perhaps will grow into something more, and if they do not become passionate lovers, then at least respect each other. That would be enough for the young businessman. The Swifts would own a large furniture and door set business. The business was profitable spouses, engaged in it for many years. But now, in the opinion of his parents, it was time to put the reins of the company in the hands of their only son, so that he could bring a fresh creative eye to their empire and the latest trends in the field. Michael, who up to this point had been mostly only superficially familiar with his family's business, was somewhat shocked by the scale of the business he was now to manage. Previously, most of his life was spent partying with friends and courting beautiful girls. But now everything has changed, and the young man sharply had to grow up, as his parents, already being at a rather respectable age, dreamed of finally having a vacation themselves, passing their child in the safe hands of their son. And so the young businessman was preparing for the wedding, while continuing to manage the business. When in his life, there was a strange event. Once 2 weeks before the celebration, Michael received a very unusual letter in the mail. The thing was that the letter was stamped with the stamp of the regional prison. What the hell is this? He wondered to himself, and he locked himself in the bathroom so that he could print it out and read it quietly away from his true eyes. In the letter, a certain Emily informed Michael that he had given birth to 3 wonderful sons. 3. Not only that, Emily had given birth to them right in the colony. So now, if he does not intend to participate in any way in their upbringing, she is going to sue him, recovering appropriate child support. To say that Michael was shocked when he read the letter is to say nothing. What kind of nonsense? He muttered under his breath. What children? What was this woman writing about? He ran his hand over his face, as if he wanted to wipe away any trace of worry and anxiety. So now the most important thing is not to know about this nonsense. Clara said to himself aloud, Michael, it must be some kind of evil prank. A joke to spoil the mood of the bride and me before the wedding. Deciding so, the young man tore the letter into 4 pieces and shoved it deeper into his pocket and left the bathroom. Honey, are you all right? Clara asked in a concerned tone. I saw you got a letter. Nothing bad, I hope. Michael put a sort of smile on his face, but it didn't work very well. Clara immediately realized something was wrong with the groom. No, it's a favorite, he said quickly. It's fine. Just a routine business mailing. Nothing serious. Don't they send these kinds of things by email? The bride asked doubtfully. Michael tried to make a joke, saying that it was his partners who were the ones who stayed true to the old traditions. He likes to send paper letters, except that she didn't really believe it. Why does he take me for a fool or what? The girl thought to herself. Not for that. I spent 5 years in the States studying psychology to be fooled like this. Clara, I'm actually very hungry, hastened to change the subject groom. And I thought I told you you had something very unfortunate today. Can I taste it? Michael smiled at her again, but it was very fake. Sure, honey. Pretending to buy his excuses, she said the roast was waiting for you in the kitchen. The whole evening Clara behaved like a good wife, but as soon as they went to bed, she went to the kitchen under the pretext of thirst and immediately rushed to the trash can, where she noticed Michael had thrown the remains of the letter. Pulling out all 4 halves, the girl folded them and read with horror some Emily and her children. The businessman's fiancé was far from being a fool, and therefore immediately realized the case smelled of treason. Jealousy shook her heart, and she hardly waited until morning to tell her fiancé everything that had boiled up in her soul for the past night. Why don't you tell me about your mistress, Emily? Miranda asked, glaring angrily at Michael. He was just pouring coffee into his cup when he saw her fiancé in the kitchen doorway. She folded her arms across her chest and looked determined to get the truth out of her fiancé. What mistress? He didn't understand at first. You must be confused, sweetheart. Then Michael remembered the letter and immediately turned pale, but his fiancé nodded to him. Not only did you decide to get some aunt on the side, but she managed to give birth to a bunny in prison. Michael, do you realize how shameful this is for me? Clark's eyes were on fire, but Michael was just confused, not knowing what to say to the accusation. He had absolutely no idea who this Emily was, nor did he know why she had written to this address. Yeah, there must be some mistake. The rich man tried to reassure her. There's no telling what these poor bastards have on their minds. Maybe she made it all up, and there are no children in there. You'd better be right. The bride wagged her finger at him. Because if I find out you're lying to me, and even on the eve of the wedding, I will be very, very disappointed in you. Michael, emphasizing the full form of the groom's name, his displeasure. She left the kitchen, irritably tossed her long belly hair over her shoulder. No matter how rich her fiancé was, she hadn't found herself in a dumpster either. And she wouldn't tolerate some bunny in their house. Michael only breathed a sigh of relief then, feeling that the storm had passed. The man quietly drank his coffee and got ready for work. He didn't know who exactly had sent him that damned letter. And to be honest, he didn't want to find out. The businessman hoped that the situation would resolve itself like a nightmare, but he was mistaken. About a week after this incident, the gate of the house and his fiancée someone rang. Michael was going to go for a fitting at the atelier that day to see how his wedding suit would fit. So he opened the gate himself. To his amazement, he saw on the threshold a young, attractive woman in night clothes. She was holding on to the handle of a spacious 3-month-old stroller in which lay 3 adorable babies. The stunned businessman could only ask in a weak voice, "Who are you? What do you want?" The woman looked at him sullenly, then quietly interjected, "Are you asking me who I am? Do you even have a conscience, Robert?" Michael shook his head negatively. "You must have made a mistake. I'm not Robert. My name is Michael, and I'm sorry. I don't know you at all." The eyebrows on the woman's face rose in surprise. "Oh, that's it. He doesn't know. So how to fill my head with romantic nonsense so everything is fine. But how to take responsibility for my actions and raise my children, he doesn't know me. You've got a good job, I see. Calm down, please." Michael asked her, "My fiancée is at home. She can hear you." "That's fine. Let her hear you." "How loud can you make it?" shouted back the guests. "What did you think with less? I won't find you. The whole capital is buzzing about your wedding to that aunt. I'm not stupid either. I saw an article in the paper about your marriage. A rich guy found a beautiful woman as beautiful as a new purse. What happened?" Asked at that moment came to them Clara. Miranda had already heard loud cries in the courtyard and therefore hurried to her fiancé. The visitor looked at the bride with undisguised hatred. "And good luck to you. Beautiful." In a mocking tone, she said, and jokingly bowed to the bride. "But you see, we are having a small talk with your fiancé. I gave birth to his children." Miranda nodded at the throne. "But he doesn't want to recognize me. He's hiding from me. Even changed his name. He's so afraid." Clara stared at Michael in shock, but he felt the same way. He was definitely seeing the woman standing in front of him for the first time in his life. "It's true, what she says?" the bride asked him with tears in her eyes. No, I swear to you." The businessman shook his head. "I don't know her at all, and I don't know what's going on here. It's a joke." This is where the young man finally realized who was in front of him. "Wait, so it's you, Emily. You're the one who wrote the other day." The woman gave a short and evil grin. "You remembered my name." "Yes, I'm Emily. And these are your children. You miserable bastard. I did 8 months in prison. You got me pregnant, by the way. That's how our babies were born. He's revoked my parole. Thank God, I didn't have a very heavy sentence, so he took mercy on a single mother of many children." "God, what a horror," only Clara could exclaim. Spurred on with anger and resentment, she asked her fiancé, "And you will claim that you knew nothing about her?" As you could, Michael seemed that his head was about to explode from him, left all on him from both sides groundless accusations. It was clear that it was Emily who thought he was the father of her children. But that certainly could never be the case. "Look, why don't we go inside? I'll have the economist make you some hot tea, and I'm sure we can sort this out. But let's stop yelling in the middle of the street." Anyway, Michael's upbringing didn't allow him to chase this poor woman off the doorstep. He was determined to sort things out, and he felt sorry for her children, who were certainly not to blame for anything. Emily hesitated, but then she agreed and went into the house. The 3 books began to worry. The mother realized they were hungry. The housekeeper took the woman to a separate room, where she could quietly feed the children. In the meantime, she brewed their guest a fragrant portion of herbs. "I do not understand one thing, Michael, when you left," then managed to go to hissed angrily to the businessman Clara. "No one's heard yet. You've been at work all day, tired, and you've only slept with me. I can't believe you could fast for this redneck." And Michael looked at her with a gloomy look. "I'm telling you for the 100th time, honey, I didn't cheat on you. This is a mistake, but I'm going to try to find out why this woman thinks it is." The bride looked at him skeptically. Do you think I'm really going to believe your words? After all this, Michael had no intention of continuing this argument, especially since Emily had already come out to join them in the kitchen. When sitting at the table, the businessman tried to ask her as correctly as possible, "Emily, explain why you are sure that I am the father of your children." The mother of many children looked at him with such a look, as if she explained the simplest truths to a tree. "Who else would it be? Or don't you remember how you first charmed me and had an affair with me, and then brazenly set me up?" And Michael looked at the guest with sincere sympathy. Whatever had happened to that woman, she'd obviously been through something terrible. I mean, we worked at that firm together. Remember, I was an accountant, and you made me sign that unfortunate document that put me on the hook. I went to jail for it, and just before the trial, I found out I was expecting your baby. The doctors later told me it would be triple, and I said it. She could barely hold back her tears. She was very hurt. She was hurt that the man she had loved so sincerely had betrayed her, and now she didn't even want to admit that he was wrong. Michael looked at Emily carefully and then asked, "Can you tell me the exact name of the company where you worked and the time period you were an accountant there?" She nodded and gave all the information she was interested in. Michael nodded then and called the economist over to her. "Wendy will show you to a room where you can stay with the children. Please try to calm down and rest. In the meantime, I will try to find out what happened to you and your real fiancé." Emily only looked at him in amazement. Miranda hadn't expected Michael to be so interested in her. For the first time, the woman began to wonder if she was really looking at her Robert. "Thank you." Suddenly she said, "Whoever you are, thank you for not leaving me and my children in the lurch." When the housekeeper took Emily to the second floor, a furious Clara burst into the kitchen. "What, you're really gonna leave this task in our house? You're out of your mind." In response, Michael only raised his hand warningly. "Wait, get hot, honey. I need to find out why Emily mistook me for the father of her children." The story she told, it's very likely true. I just checked online, and the company she was talking about does exist. It's in a neighboring town in the region. I'll go there tomorrow and find out. Clara wanted to scandalize the groom, but she thought better of it. I don't know what's going on. What if there really is a misunderstanding? Then she had ruined her and Michael's happiness with her own hands. She wanted too much to get married, and she put too much effort into making the upcoming ceremony perfect. And as long as she could put up with that boorish Emily and her children for a couple of days, she would be fine. The very next morning, the businessman hit the road. Arriving in a neighboring town and finding the office, presumably the one in which he worked, Michael walked through the door a little anxiously. The guard exclaimed joyfully at the sight of him, "It's been a long time since you've been here. We've lost you. How are you? How's your health?" "What's wrong with my health?" "I don't understand, Michael. What happened?" Did the security guard lower his eyes in embarrassment? "You went straight to sick leave after that incident, didn't you? Only you never came back. So we thought you must be seriously ill." The young businessman realized that if he wanted to know the truth, he would have to play along with the local employees. "Thank you. I'm fine now," he replied evasively. "But could you remind me what floor our office is on? I'm not very good at orienting myself in space after my illness." The guard looked at him surprised for a minute, but then he said, "It's the same place. We are based on the 6th floor. Nothing has changed in the meantime." Michael thanked him and then went to the indicated floor. There he really found a big office of the type of open space. A mass of employees sat side by side, separated only by plastic partitions that gave a very faint illusion of a separate space. A few people from the general hive immediately caught sight of him and began to wave vigorously at Michael. "Robert, but thank God they came back. How much did we miss you?" A pretty blonde woman said, embarrassed, approaching the businessman. "Robert, darling, isn't it a miracle? Where have you been all this time? Where have you been?" asked him some full-bodied man in glasses while desperately shaking the businessman by the hand. Yes, I have, actually. Listen, why do you all call me Robert? The people around him immediately fell silent and began to look among themselves in surprise. Finally, the blonde replied, "Because you, Robert Korolkov, are our favorite sales manager. Don't you remember anything?" Michael shook his head in surprise. Then the man in glasses continued, "You disappeared from the office a few months ago, just before Emily, our head accountant, went to jail. She forged some kind of document and stole some $1 million from the company. And then you got sick and disappeared." Michael had absolutely no idea. How could this be possible if he had been leading his normal life all this time? The only explanation could be that he had a twin brother or a very similar twin. However, the latter was most unlikely. Did he really have a twin he knew nothing about? After thanking the staff and getting rid of their persistent curiosity, Michael left the office and went straight to his parents' mansion. He hoped that this conversation would bring him closer to solving the mystery. Only his father and mother were as shocked as he was. "What are you doing, son? What twin brothers?" Vanessa said, perplexed. "You are our only favorite child. Maybe you just misunderstood something," the father suggested. "Sometimes people look so much alike that under certain circumstances they can be confused. You know, actors' diaries are in the papers all the time. I think this is your case." A frustrated Michael drove back home. In my opinion, he realized that if his parents knew nothing about his hypothetical brother, then therefore he simply did not exist. However, the businessman's heart told him something else. The man felt in this story too many white spots, and most likely, his double did not just disappear without a trace. Perhaps something bad had happened to him, and maybe even he needed help. Michael hired a couple of reliable private investigators and started searching, and he looked for his doppelganger everywhere he could, in backwoods villages, hospitals, scour, even all the homeless shelters in the area. But no one had ever heard of Robert. Finally, desperate, Michael decided to check the nearest morgue, but even there he was met with rejection. At least it is clear now that he is either alive or really missing, Michael said to himself aloud, returning from another village, where he conducted a survey with one of the detectives. He was always wondering where Robert, who looked so much like him, had gone. It seemed to the young businessman that he was overlooking some simple detail that would help him find the clue. Just what that detail was, Michael could not yet understand. His attention was drawn to a homeless man who was sitting by the side of the road, begging for alms. The man was holding an old cap in his outstretched hand. Apparently, he was hoping that one of the drivers would stop and help him. But that's not what attracted Michael to him. The eyes. The beggar's eyes were exactly the same color and had the same expression as his own. In moments of sadness or longing, it was as if Michael was looking in a mirror, looking at this beggar. Plus, their hair was almost the same shade, except the beggar's hair was a little lighter because it was sunburnt. And Michael's friend whistled at him. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" The beggar looked at the businessman and was stunned. Clearly, Michael's face seemed very familiar to him. After all, it was his own face. The homeless man crossed himself and wanted to run away. But the young businessman managed to stop him. "Wait, you do not be afraid. I did not hurt you." Out of breath, Michael said, when he finally managed to catch up with the beggar. "You won't believe me, but I've been looking for you for a long time." "Why?" The beggar asked him rudely. "I mean, I had a lot of acquaintances on the highway who can stand up for me and sacrifice themselves. I won't." "What's with the smile?" Michael asked him again. "What sacrifice? You misunderstand me. I'm not a sectarian or a demon, and I'm not looking for people for organs either. I'm just a man who realized that he found his own brother." Although Robert's face was overgrown with a thick beard and his long hair confused all the branches, it was undoubtedly him. In entreating the poor man to get into the car and promising to take him to a good cafe so that he could have a full meal, Michael explained the whole situation to him and asked him what had happened to him then. "I'd like to help you," Robert answered with a sigh. "But I don't remember anything. I came to my senses on the street almost a year ago. That's how I've been living. All right, city folks, the bums took me in. Otherwise, it would have been a real drag. Then Michael pulled a picture of Emily out of his jacket pocket. She was pictured with her children. He had specifically asked her to take a picture so that he would have something to show Robert when he found him. When he took the picture, Michael's twin brother felt as if he had been electrocuted. Memories came back to him one by one. Point by point, someone was dipping into his memory like a computer. Mother of God, it was all the beggar could squeeze out of himself. Emily. The man remembered, and large tears immediately rolled from his eyes. The feelings swept over him like a wave of the sea. Robert was losing his train of thought every time he tried to tell Michael about the last days of his former life. I did work at that firm, and we had an affair, Robert explained. But I would never betray her, beggar sighed heavily. We loved each other sincerely. I wanted to propose to her. I'd already picked out a ring. I was forced to make this unfortunate money transfer by Deputy Director John. If I had known that with my own hands I was postponing my favorite prison sentence, I would have immediately torn it to shreds. But I knew nothing. The deputy told me he'd made a lucrative contract with the foreigners. That's where the deal had to be handled carefully. Sort of like a tax advantage deal. If that's true, where did you disappear to? Why didn't you inquire about your fiancée? Michael asked him. Because I didn't have time. Robert answered gloomily. I was coming home from work very late that day. The same John asked me to stay late. I had to double-check some figures in the material purchase reports. The man slowly rubbed his forehead as if remembering the events of that fateful evening. Anyway, when I went outside, it was dark. It was very early, you know. The last thing I remember is walking up to my driveway, and then it was all dark. I've lost my memory almost completely. I can't even remember my name. I remember on the B. My name was Robert shrugged. I can't believe it. I had 3 kids before I was born. I looked down at the twins with emotion. Thank you for taking care of my Emily. I swear I would never hurt her on purpose. It creeps me out when I think about the long 8 months she had to spend in juvie this year. Michael nodded. He realized that his brother had most likely been attacked with the intent to kill him. This John had obviously pocketed a few 1 billion and then cleverly disposed of all the unwitting participants in his scam. And Emily, as an accountant, faced a trial and a prison sentence, and they tried to get rid of Robert physically. Luckily, they failed. What's that supposed to mean? Robert suddenly asked him. You're kind of like my twin brother. It can't be that we're so much alike. I don't know how it happened, Michael said thoughtfully, but you and I will find out. In the meantime, I think we'd better go to the police and tell them everything. We've got to get John before he ruins any more lives. Robert liked the idea, and they went to the nearest police station, where they told everything as it happened. The law enforcement officers, of course, were quite surprised by their story. However, they still arrested the deputy for background checks. Under pressure, John quickly cracked and confessed, so he was soon to get a fair trial and a big prison sentence. Meanwhile, Michael brought Robert to the house of his parents, where he furtively showed him his father and mother. However, as soon as the homeless man looked at these well-groomed, well-dressed elderly people, his face immediately turned white as a sheet. Michael asked him worriedly, You look like you've seen a ghost. Not exactly, but his brother answered him almost evasively. Then he turned to Michael, and Michael saw a look of utter bewilderment on his face. Michael, I know these people, the businessman interjected in amazement. I'm telling you, they are my distant relatives, old-timers. They have looked after and supported me since I was a child. And yet I've never been a guest of theirs. Michael felt his hands wringing with shock. He certainly didn't expect this from his relatives. You're sure you're not mistaken, Michael clarified. But I've never heard you. To be honest, I didn't know I had such a grandnephew, or even an exact replica. Michael grinned bitterly. He realized now that his parents were deceiving him, lying to his face without blushing. I was always the 7th water on the vine for them. Robert sighed sadly. But is it possible that distant relatives like you and me are so much alike? Michael looked fiercely at his own father and mother. Let's go up to them and ask them in person. Robert was a little worried, watching Michael get out of the car with determination and slammed the driver's door behind him with some force. But there was nothing to do. Robert reluctantly got out of his cushioned seat too. When the parents noticed Michael, they waved at him excitedly at first. Vanessa was just tending the roses in their small garden. But when she saw the previous one next to her son Robert, the smile slowly slipped from her face, giving way to confusion and fear. "But hello, Mother," he started coldly. Michael, approaching her, "Look who I met in town. Surprisingly similar to me, isn't he? Son, wait, what's going on?" Stephen rushed over to them. When he saw Robert, he shuddered involuntarily. "Hello to you too, Dad," the young businessman replied just as sternly. "Mom and I were just talking about how you forgot to tell me about our distant relative Robert. What a coincidence he is. He looks exactly like me, even though you claimed I had no brothers and certainly no twins. Meanwhile, all these years, it turns out you've been helping Bora with my grandnephew and doppelganger. Isn't that right?" Prestige's parents did not know what to answer to this son. Finally, when the awkward pause dragged on, Michael asked if there were too many lies in our family. Parents come into the house came. "It's time for you to tell Robert and me the whole truth. Son," Vanessa sobbed, "forgive us if you can. You were never meant to find out." Robert, overwhelmed by the urgency of the situation, didn't know what to say yes, and was it even worth it? When they went inside the mansion and settled down in the spacious living room of the watchful elders, the first to begin the difficult story was the brothers' father, Stephen. "I don't even know where to begin," he said slowly to the boys. "Probably with the fact that you are not our native sons. How dumbfounded." Michael questioned. "Alas, but it's true," his father answered him. "It all happened many years ago. You weren't even a year old then. Jenna and I worked as ordinary Swedes in the same store. There was no wealth to speak of. We could barely make ends meet, and we were happy about it. It was very hard for us. But we tried to be honest and decent people and never did anything illegal." Stephen looked at his wife strangely at these words, but said the following aloud. "Be that as it may, but when we saw that burning car on the road, and Jenna and I had no time to think about you, we pulled you out of the fire a few moments before the car exploded. It was a frightening, deplorable sight at the same time. We realized you were orphans, so we decided to take you in." Father Michael Robert looked meaningfully at his wife. She, catching his gaze, only lowered her eyes. "When we found out who your real parents were, we couldn't believe our luck at first. Camille and Ethan turned out to be really rich. Yeah, they already had that furniture business," Dad confirmed. "And if it hadn't been for us, he'd probably have gotten himself some racketeers. They'd have split it up. End of story. 90 hard times to create." Michael looked at his adoptive mother and father in bewilderment. "So what's this about? You took over our dead parents' business. Do you realize that this is a crime, that you yourselves are criminals?" Stephen preemptively raised his hand. "Don't be so judgmental. Michael, think about it. If you had been found not by us, but, say, by the Child Welfare Service, would you be who you are now?" The man sighed heavily. "Yes, we may not have been completely honest, but we did adopt you, and we introduced ourselves as best friends of your birth parents. That didn't raise any questions at the time. The notary deeded all their assets to us. That's where Robert came in. But why did you separate me and my brother, and why did you take the surname of our real mother and father?" Vanessa just shrugged. "It was easier that way. Besides, as it turned out later, your relatives and I turned out to be remarkably similar in appearance. Not one and the same, of course, but the same type. So, in order not to agonize with the paperwork, we changed our modest surname to a more noble sounding. People hardly noticed the difference, and we were not eager to tell about who we really are. And so, over time, we came to be seen as your real parents, It was very uncomfortable with Robert. It's true, Stephen added. When he was little, he refused to accept us. So eventually Jenna and I grew tired of his many tantrums, reluctant to give to our friends. They did not have children, and they gladly agreed to take Borja. However, we tried to always keep him under control, to help him with words, not to lose sight of him. But on the other hand, he was not supposed to know that he had a twin brother. Vanessa finished for her husband. By the time things settled down, society knew us as a family with one only child. We needed to maintain that image, and we did everything we could to keep Robert's existence from leaking to the press. Robert shook his head reproachfully. "What kind of people are you?" he asked them. "They told me they were always happy to help, but not to come to your house, or your important friends might think something. You constantly emphasized my social status, saying that I am from a poor family, and I need to study a lot to achieve everything in this life by myself. And I believed you. You inspired me all these years. And now it turns out that you've been pretending to be a completely different person all this time, playing your part in public and lying to Michael and me." Robert jumped to his feet. The young man was filled with righteous anger. How could you? How could you do this to us?" And most importantly, Vanessa, who was already sobbing, clutched at her heart. "Mom." Michael cried out and instinctively rushed to the woman. "All right, Robert, calm down. Let's not make a Shakespearean drama here." "They'll calm down. You're offering me this knowing these two are crooks. Wake up, Michael. They just stole our lives." But they didn't. They killed our biological parents. His brother snapped him out of it. If it wasn't for Mom and Dad, we might not even be alive anymore. Think about it. The car could have blown up at any second. It's a miracle they were anywhere near the crash site. But to you, they were father and mother. Robert said grimly. "Of course, I lived in luxury, didn't need anything. Didn't you have to save money to have food in the house tomorrow? Do you think we would have been better off in the orphanage?" Michael asked calmly, carefully pouring the foster mother some water. "Think about it. We both had families. It may not have been perfect, but, kids, please stop fighting." Vanessa suddenly asked them. "Stephen and I realize we've caused you a lot of pain and hurt with our actions. I think it's time for us to make amends with you." Stephen looked at Robert with genuine sympathy. "Robert, from now on, you can be the full owner of the family business as Michael. We'll sign all the papers. I don't want the people who have become closest to me over the years to continue to suffer because of me." Michael's adoptive father tried to discreetly wipe away a harsh male tear, but he failed. Following the first tear, a second tear rolled down. And his too. Stephen silently wept with love and regret looking at his twin sons. "Forgive us, please," Vanessa asked them. "I am willing to do whatever it takes, just so long as you call me Mom again." Michael. "And you, Robert, Auntie." Looking at the sincerity of these people, Robert nevertheless forgave them, just as his brother had done. After all, Michael was right. They had saved them by pulling them out of the burning car. And that was their greatest gift as a boy. Eventually, Robert was rewritten part of the firm and became involved in the family business with Michael. As it turned out, Robert had a terrific instinct for commercially profitable projects. So Michael more than once later thanked the higher powers for allowing him to meet his brother. But that day, when the truth came out like an unstoppable tornado, Robert could not stop thinking about one thing: how Emily and his children. After a visit to Michael's parents, he asked his brother to take him to his beloved, and he promptly complied. When Robert timidly entered the room, holding the door so that it would not rattle. Immersed in his troubles, Emily did not immediately notice him. It was only by chance that the woman turned around and saw her missing lover in front of her and cried out loudly. "Oh my God, Robert, are you imagining things?" Emily slowly approached him and touched his face with both hands. "No, I'm not imagining my favorite." Tears glistened in the other brother's eyes. "Is it true? Aya, forgive me, I'm so sorry to you." Robert hugged the mother of his children tightly, and began to shower her face with kisses. Emily was embarrassed. She realized standing in front of her was her true, beloved and closest person in the world. A little later, when Robert told her his story and explained why he had failed to protect her then, Emily nodded understandingly and said, "Now I see that you and your brother are very different people. God, I'm so ashamed. I must have hurt him so badly. I said so many mean things to him when I came over. I can't believe he let me stay here after all that. He believed what I said and went looking for you. What an amazing man that Michael is." "Yes, my brother turned out to be a good guy," Robert confirmed with a smile. "He even helped me forgive our foster parents. Well, that's what they are to him. To me, they've always been distant kin." Not wanting to think about the bad stuff, Robert shook his head as if chasing away bad thoughts. The most important thing for him now was to stay close to his lover and his children, and to do everything he could to get back on his feet. He realized that he couldn't live under the same roof with his brother forever, but now he had a chance to realize himself in the family business, and he's not gonna let it go. "It's your brother, the bum, and his wife. They're going to live with us now," I asked in a disgruntled tone the day after she and Robert got home. "Nil, how can you say that?" Michael was indignant. "Robert and Emily will be here as long as it takes. They're my family. Don't forget that, please, and show them at least a little respect and sympathy, not family." And I frowned at the bride. "We're about to get married, and now you're walking around like a zombie. No interest, only relatives on your mind." The young businessman quickly realized that Clara deliberately provoked him into a scandal. It was easy to imagine how she felt now that she was not the only one who completely captured the heart of Michael. His fiancée, as it turned out, was creepy, actually, and not vice. Honey, he began. "Maybe we should cancel this wedding." You didn't believe your ears. "But why? Because of your crazy family. Tell me that Robert has told you a lot of disgusting things about me. I'm sure you would never have thought of it yourself." Liam just smiled politely. "This isn't about my brother, and it's certainly not about me. It's about you, sweetheart. Look at you, and you just can't live with yourself. I've tried, I really have, to live up to your high standards. But I guess it's time to face the truth. We're not right for each other." "No," I shrieked angrily. "You are. I'm not letting you go. I always get what I want, and I want to marry you." At that moment, the bride reminded him of a capricious child. "And I don't want to marry you," he simply answered her. "If we're so scandalized now, what will happen next? You haven't thought about that. And then I'm not a thing you can possess. I hope that in time you will realize that this decision was the right one." She wasn't ready to tolerate this attitude of hers. Pride made the girl quickly pack her suitcase and permanently leave Michael's house that very day. The businessman's parents. At first, they were upset that the wedding had failed, but eventually accepted their son's choice. The most surprising thing was that as soon as Michael immediately felt better, from now on he decided to live that very normal life, where no one would no longer tell him what to do and how to do it, and where every decision would depend solely on himself. A while later, he met Kelly. She was a nice, pretty girl of about 25. They met by chance. Kelly had twisted her foot trying to run across the road at the gas on green. When she was already in mid-heel, her shoe broke on her, and the girl almost collapsed into the roadway. Good thing Michael was nearby. He helped the stranger out. "Let us give you a ride home," he offered her. "I'm afraid you now with your sore leg better not to go unnecessarily on the local asphalt. So much you are in a position to complain about the road builders." Kelly only laughed lightly in response and agreed to accept Michael's help. He himself did not understand what he was so caught up in her, but there was only in her face something subtly familiar. Kelly reminded someone Michael, but whom the young businessman could not understand. From that moment between him and Kelly began a tender and kind relationship. At first it was more like friendship, but soon the young people realized they are perfectly suited to each other and sometimes as if reading the thoughts of his beloved. Kelly had a young son from a previous relationship. Sashinka suffered from a heart defect, and Kelly was ready to work as a nurse in 3 shifts, just to raise money for the operation. When Michael heard about it, he promised to help the boy. "Do not worry, I will be able to achieve that with Sasha made the operation out of turn," assured the young mother businessman. Kelly is only grateful, cried and kissed her lover. A couple of weeks later, Michael invited her to a family dinner. He really wanted to introduce Zhenya to his parents, and she was not against it. However, when everyone was already gathered at the table, Vanessa accidentally dropped some of the cutlery. Kelly bent down to help her pick up the spoons and forks. At that moment, a small gold pendant in the shape of a heart fell out of the collar of her dress. "Oh my God!" Michael's mother exclaimed, and involuntarily sat down on the edge of her chair with her hands over her mouth. "No, it can't be. No, it can't be. What happened?" "I didn't understand anything, Michael, but don't scare me." Vanessa looked with horror first at her future daughter-in-law and then at her husband, Stephen. Notice how he immediately turned pale, heartbroken. The parents revealed to their son another terrible secret. It turns out that his wife was his own daughter. "We then, the money completely in the eyes of the eyes," admitted everything mother. "And we gave our little girl to an orphanage so that she would never know who she was." Vanessa burst into loud tears. "How could I, God? How could I?" "But Michael, I had no idea how I could explain the appearance of a daughter in our family. I decided that I would go all the way to the end, and I would live up to the image that I had created earlier with your dad. Don't think. Later I regretted it very much, but I couldn't change anything. This is the pendant we gave Kelly at birth," added Father Michael. "It's one of a kind. I had it specially ordered from a jewelry shop. Kelly, daughter, holds no grudges. We've made so many mistakes in life. I'm afraid we'll never be able to undo them until the end." Kelly only gently stroked the groom's parents on the shoulders. "Let's not suffer for what we can't change, especially since I had the most wonderful adoptive parents in the world. I always knew I wasn't related to them, but that didn't stop me from loving them. Namely, so my childhood was completely uneventful." Michael's parents gave their biological daughter a friendly hug. Michael, however, was so shocked by what he had learned that he couldn't immediately find the right words. So that's what had him so attracted to Kelly. That's who she reminded him of, his own mother. But still, he managed to find the strength to forgive their absent-minded parent again. After all, this way he was once again convinced that he had the most wonderful brides on earth. A few months later, Michael and Kelly had a beautiful wedding in nature, as they were not blood relatives, so they could marry without any problems. It was the happiest day for both of them. And the guests, including Brother Robert, with his wife and children, considered it the best wedding they had ever been to. Kelly's young son had heart surgery and is now perfectly healthy. As he grew older, he enjoyed playing with Robert's sons. After all, that son was a frequent guest in the house of Michael and Kelly. The brothers still run a general business, and now their entire huge family is perfectly happy. Kelly plans to open a small medical center in the near future to help women who have problems with the reproductive network. Now out of maternity leave, she is actively enhancing her professional qualifications, hoping to help everyone who wants to have children. Why out of maternity leave? Yes, because recently she gave her beloved a daughter. The girl is perfectly healthy and pleases her parents every day.